Now that we have this, we can actually get started on actually creating the PHP part for this episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside my gallery page, and the first thing I want to do before we create any sort of upload feature is the form at the bottom here. I want to hide it if we're not logged into the website, because I know I will get questions about this in the comments of this video if I don't show it. So we're going to do that first. So the form that is down here that we just created, I'm going to go ahead and just wrap it inside PHP tags. Then I'm going to echo everything inside the form here. There's probably a quicker way to write this, but this is the way I like to do it. There we go. And then I'm going to create an if statement. The if statement, and again, this shouldn't be new for you if you've seen my login system tutorial that I have in this playlist here. What I'm going to write in here is a isSet check that will check if we're logged into the website. If we're logged in, there should be a session variable somewhere inside the website that will be set. So if we're logged in, the session variable is going to be set. If it's not, then we're going to hide the form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for a session variable or a session Superglobal. So we're going to say session. And the session is going to be named, I don't know, something like username. So if we're logged in, then we have a session variable set as username. What I'm going to do then is I want to show this form here if we have a session variable set, which means we're logged in. Now, right now, because we don't have a session variable actually set inside the website, as you can see, it's going to be hidden inside the browser here. So we can't actually see the upload form at the bottom of the website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit because, like I said, we're not going to create a complete login system in this episode. But I'm going to do something else instead. I'm just going to go to the top of the website. And I'm going to go ahead and just create the session variable inside the page. So it's always going to be active inside this page here. So I'm going to say we have a $sign underscore session. It's going to be called username. And it's going to be set equal to a string called admin. Oops. There we go. Now, the next thing we need to do before we do anything else with PHP code is we need to go inside our database and create a database table for the images when we upload them. So I'm going to go inside my browser. I'm going to go inside my local host, and I'm going to go inside my databases tab up here at the top. Then I'm going to create a new database. I'm going to call it something like, let's see, gallery example. Again, you can call whatever you want. I'm just going to call my database gallery example because this is what I'm doing this episode. I'm just going to go ahead and create it. And right now we have nothing inside gallery example. We have no tables or no data. So I need to go inside my SQL tab up here in the top after selecting the gallery database over here on the side. And we need to go ahead and create the table for this specific database. I'm just going to zoom in so you can actually see what I'm going to create in here. Now, we could also go in and make this in a different way. We could also not write this out like we're going to do right now. I have received feedback on that in the past because I'm quite aware that PHP admin has a feature we can just select with drop downs and that sort of thing to create tables. But it is much better practice to write it out inside the SQL tab here so you can actually get to know SQL code and not just know how to do it the boring way. So we're going to create it by actually writing out the code inside of here. So we're going to create a table. So we're going to say create table. And the table is going to be named gallery. Again, you can name it so many things. I'm just going to name it gallery. Then I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of parentheses, a semicolon, go a couple of lines down so we can write inside the parentheses. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an ID. Now, there's a couple of different naming conventions when it comes to creating names for columns inside a table, like the one we have here. Now, one way that I like to do it is by, first of all, creating the name for the specific column, and then afterwards creating the name for the actual table next to it with a capitalized first letter. So I can say gallery is going to be the second word here. I'm going to go ahead and say this is a int type. Again, this is basics. This is basic PHP. You should know how to do this by now. All we're doing here is we're going to say that we want to have a ID for this specific table here, which is something all tables are going to have. Okay. So afterwards, we're going to make this into a auto. I don't quite know how you say that. Auto increment, I think you say. Increment. It's going to be the primary key as well. Let's actually zoom out a bit because I can't fit it on one line. There we go. And I'm going to set it to not null. Comma. Next line. Again, a lot of people write in the comments about getting errors here. Make sure you add the commas and don't have a comma after the last column that we're going to create here, because that is something that will give you errors as well. The next one is going to be called title gallery. And this is actually where we start inserting the actual data for our upload when we upload a picture to our gallery. So this is going to be the title that we upload inside the input that is going to be inserted inside this specific column here. Now I'm just going to set this one as long text, which is a longer version of varchar, which is just in general something I've come into a habit to use because it's just easier. So I'm going to say long text, and then I'm going to set this one to not null. Next line, and then we're going to create one called description or desk gallery. This is going to be long text as well. You could also just copy paste from above, that might be easier, not null. And then I'm just going to copy paste it, because we need to have one more column that is not going to be called desk gallery, but instead I'm going to call it image or img full name gallery. Okay, and this is going to be the full name of the file after we upload it to our website, because we're going to change the name of the file once we upload it, first of all, in order to avoid there being multiple files with the same name, because if there were to be that, then the files will overwrite each other. That is not something we want to have inside our gallery in case we have two images with the same name. So we need to make sure that we create a unique name for each picture that gets uploaded. So that's why we have this one here. The next one is going to be something that we won't touch upon this much in this episode. If you want to, at a later point, change the order of the images inside the gallery, because maybe the latest image you uploaded might not want to, you might not want to have that at the top, but instead in the middle somewhere, then we could, at a later point, create some kind of PHP feature inside the website where we can change the order of them. So in case we want that, I'm going to create a order gallery column. And again, it's always better to have too many columns than too little, because it's annoying to miss something and then at a later point figure out that you need to add it. So we need to have this one. So not null. And this is going to be the last column inside this table here, because it's the last one. We don't insert a comma at the end here. So I'm going to just run this at the bottom here, go. And now we have a gallery table inside the database. So now, if I were to zoom out again, we do actually have something that is ready for us to create the PHP code that allow for us to upload to the website. So now, going back inside our coding here, we can go inside the gallery-upload file. And at the top here, I'm going to open up the PHP code. Now, we don't need to have the closing PHP tag at the end if it's a pure PHP file. Again, this is why I like to call it a include file, because we don't have anything else than PHP code that needs to do something. We're not going to show anything inside the website with this code here. So inside of here, I'm going to create a if statement, because the first thing we need to do is check if we actually submitted this form here. Now, the form button is called submit as a name. So we need to check if we have a is set parentheses $_post, which is a Superglobal that is used to send the data to this document. And we want to check for submit. Then afterwards, what we need to do is we need to actually grab all the data that we submitted to this document here. Oh, you can actually see my screen recorder. So inside of here, I'm just going to go down a couple of lines. I am going to go ahead and grab, first of all, the inputs that we can write in manually inside the actual form, which is something that you should be familiar with from previous episodes. So I'm going to say we have a variable called new file name, because this is the new file name we could optionally create in the form. And I'm going to set it equal to the Superglobal post that we submitted from the form. And this one is not going to be called submit, but it's going to be called, if I refer to it, as file name inside of here. Then we will get the proper data from it. Then I'm going to do something right underneath here before we grab the rest of the data, because if I chose not to submit anything from this form inside this specific input, then I want to create an if statement. If this specific Superglobal has been left empty, because it could possibly have been left empty, then I want to create a default name for the specific file. So what I want to do here is I want to say we have this specific variable up here. I just punched the microphone, I think. And I want to set it equal to something that I can make up. So I'm going to call it gallery as a name. Now you might be asking, well, isn't all the files going to be called gallery now if we don't submit a name to it? For now it is, but later on inside this script, we're going to create a random ID that we will attach to the name. So it's always going to be a different name, even if we have all the images as gallery as the default name. Now, the reason that, like I said, I want to include this section here where you can actually rename the files when you upload them is because it is better for SEO, which means that you can better be found on Google, to have properly named files. So this specific feature here is a great option if you forgot to change the name of the file before you uploaded it. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and say that, well, if this is the case that we don't have anything filled out, then else I want to go ahead and do something to the data that we grab from the form. Because let's say the user went into the website. Let's take my completed example here. Let's say the user went into this website here, and for the file name, create a bunch of spaces. Then we want to do something to replace those spaces with something else, because spaces are not good to have inside a file name. So what I'm going to do, just going to zoom out again so we can actually see, is I'm going to go ahead and create a small piece of code here that will actually replace the spaces with a dash instead. And we're also going to transform all the entire name into a lowercase lettering, because that makes it easier for us in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the same variable, new file name, and I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to a function called string to lower, which is converting this value we get from the user to lowercase, which is the first thing we need to do. Inside the parentheses, I'm also going to run a second function, which is going to be a string underscore replace, which is going to replace any sort of spaces, because I just created a space inside the first parameter, with a dash, and then I want to tell it which specific piece of data that it needs to do this to, and we need to do that to new file name, which is up here. So after we do this, new file name is going to be equal to the new file name value, which is going to be lowercase and without spaces in it. Ta-da! So now that we did this, we can actually skip on and start getting the rest of the data. And this was the most complicated one to grab from the gallery page. So the rest of them are going to be much easier. So the next one here, I'm just going to copy what we have up here. And I'm going to say we want to grab not the new file name, but instead the image title. Then I want to change it to file title. I do believe we called it inside the form. Then I'm going to copy it, paste it below, and then we want to get the image description. So we're just going to call this one image disk for description, and change to file desk. Now the last thing we need to grab from the form is going to be the actual file that we submitted inside the form. Now the way that we do that is using a files Superglobal, just like we did with post up here. We also have one called files. And again, this is something that we talked about in the previous episode where I actually showed you how to upload files to a website. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a variable called file. I'm going to set it equal to a superglobal called $_files with an S behind, brackets, semicolon, and then inside of here I need to refer to the name of the specific files. So I'm going to say we have file, because that's what I called it inside the form here, right there. And now that we grab the actual file, we need to get the specific properties from this file, because when we upload the file, we're going to get information about it, such as the original name when we uploaded it, the size of the file, was there any kind of errors when we uploaded the file. So there's going to be a couple of different informations that we need to grab from this specific file when we submit it. So just to illustrate this, let's actually go ahead and do a print R function. So you can actually see the information I'm talking about. So if we were to actually print R, the actual file, go back inside my website just to test, refresh it, go inside the upload, write something random because we don't need to use it for anything just quite yet, upload an image, upload it, then you can see we get a bunch of information inside an array. And as you can see, we get the name of the file, which is the original name for the file. We get the type, which is a JPEG format. We get the temporary name, which is the file name that is going to be stored inside the browser temporarily as we're still uploading it. So once we uploaded the file, it's going to remove the temporary name again. We also get something like error messages. Was there any sort of error when we uploaded this file? So this is all something that is good to have. And then lastly, of course, we also get the size of the actual image here. So as you can see, we get this size here. So going back into our PHP code, instead of print R, I'm going to grab each of these data individually and insert them into a variable. So we can actually use them in order to do error handling later on, which is kind of cool because we can do stuff like checking if the file is a certain size, because if it's above a certain size, we can say, well, we don't want that file uploaded to our website. What are you thinking about? So we can go ahead and create that sort of error handlers inside our website. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete the print R, and I'm going to go ahead and grab these pieces of information from the file. So I'm going to say we have a variable called file name, which is the original name from the file. I'm going to set equal to variable file, which we have up here. Ta-da! And we're going to grab the part of the array which is the file name. So we're going to refer to the name of this array. Then I'm going to copy it, paste it below 4 more times because we have 5 in total, I think. The next one is going to be the file type. Then we're going to write type inside of here because that is the, what do you call it, the name for it inside the array. Then we have the third one, which is going to be the temp name, which is the temporary name for the file. And then I'm just going to go ahead and say we want to grab the temp_name. Again, if this confuses you, I talked about this in a previous episode, so it's crucial that you watch that episode because I explain in much more detail in that episode. So the fourth one is going to be not the file name, but the file error. If we had any sort of error messages, then I'm going to change it to error inside of here. Then we're going to change the not from the file name, but the file size, and get the size. So now we have this information which we need in order to do error handling. And again, you don't need to have this, but well, some of it you do need to have, but some of these are just for error handling purposes. So you don't need to have all of these information here. Again, we want to do a proper tutorial, so we're going to get all of them. So now that we grabbed all the data from the form, we can actually start doing something to it and upload the image to the website. So what I'm going to do to start with here is I'm going to create a couple of different statements that we're going to use later on, such as what is the file extension of the uploaded file and what is the specific file type we want to allow inside the website. So there's a couple of different things we need to state before we continue with the code here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say that I want to grab the extension from the uploaded file. So I'm going to say we want to get the file extension or just ext, and it's going to be equal to the file name. Now, we don't want to get the entire file name, we just want to get the extension of it. So I'm going to use a method called explode. And what we do here is we want to take apart the name of the file, and we want to get just the last part of it, which is the extension. So I want to explode the file name where we have a punctuation, because it's going to be called filename.jpg or something. So we take apart the name from the punctuation there. So now that we did this, I want to do something to the extension, because what if the file has a capitalized lettering as an extension, because you sometimes run into that, which is kind of weird. So it might be JPEG and all capitalized. We don't want that. And we also need to tell it, because right now we created an array when we exploded it, that we just want to grab the last part of the array. So I'm going to go down here, create a variable called file actual extension, file actual ext. I'm going to set it equal to a method called string to lower, which we used once before, right up here, which means I'm going to convert the name to lowercase. Now inside this method here, I'm going to take the array that we created from up here, and I'm going to take just the last index from inside the array, which is going to be just the extension. So what we can do is we can use a method called end, which grabs the last index from inside an array. So right now, the file actual extension is going to be just JPEG, if that's the extension of the image, or PNG, if that's the extension. So now we have the extension from the file that was actually uploaded, because it needs to be the same extension when we do actually later on rename the actual file once we upload it to our root folder. So this is something we need to do. Afterwards, we need to tell it what kind of file types do we want to allow to be uploaded to the website. So I'm going to say we have a variable called allowed, and I'm going to set it equal to an array. And inside the array, I'm going to say we want to allow JPEGs with just this specific spelling here. I also want to allow JPEG with a E inside the name, so JPEG. I'm not sure if there's a different way to pronounce it. We also want to allow PNG images, like so. So these are the three different file types I want to allow. If you want to allow something else, then be my guest, change the different variables or the parameters inside of here. You can do that if you want to. But now we just told it what kind of file types we want to allow. So the next thing I want to do is I want to actually get started checking for different error handlers. So the first thing I want to do is I want to check if we did actually get an allowed file extension. So right now we have a couple of different ones we allow, and does this file extension actually belong to one of these we allowed? So I'm going to say we have an if statement, and inside the if statement I want to say in_array, which is another method that checks if a specific string is inside one of the indexes of a specific array. So we can say that we want to check for, not a string, but we want to check for the extension that we grabbed inside the allowed array we have down here. If it does not exist inside this array, then we want to do an else statement. Again, some people might argue we have to do error checking first and then move on to success messages. But I'm just going to do it in this specific way in this episode. You can always switch it around if you want to. So inside of here, we could say, well, if we had an error, if we don't have a file type that matches up, then we want to create an error message. And in this case, I'm just going to write an error inside this page I'm inside of right now. So I'm just going to echo something out. I'm going to echo, you need to upload a proper file type. There we go. And we also want to exit this script here. So we're going to run a exit method. So now we did this inside the if statement, if we did actually get the proper file type and uploaded it, then I want to check if we had any kind of errors when we uploaded the file, because it does actually check for this itself when you upload it. So we can do that as well. So I'm going to create an if statement again, and I'm going to call this one, well, we do actually have a variable up here called file error that tells us if there wasn't in fact an error. And we need to check if it was equal to 0. Because if it's equal to 0, it means that we had no errors when we uploaded the file and everything is fine. If we had an error message, then the variable is going to be equal to 1, which means that right now we can create an else statement that will give us another error message inside the website. So I'm going to say you had an error. Then inside the if statement, we can then check for something like file sizes. So we can say if the file is above a certain size, then we don't want to allow it inside the website. So I should say that if the file has a really, really big size, then depending on your browser, it might fail the upload, which is why we need to have this file error check here, because it means that the file is way too big to get uploaded inside the browser. Depends on the browser, I think, on how big the files can be when you upload them. So in here, I want to do another check. And what I want to do is I want to check if the file size is above a certain size. So I'm going to say if it's above something like, let's go ahead and say 2 million, which is, what is that? I'm really bad at converting this sort of thing. I think it is 20 megabyte or something like that. So it's quite a lot. I might be wrong then. If I'm wrong, I will write it on the screen what the actual file size is that I just wrote here. So this is in kilobytes. It's not in megabytes, just FYI. So now that we have this one, again, we can create another else statement that says you had an error or something like that. So we can say file size is too big, which is quite a good thing to say, I think. Hi, Daniel here again, just to sort of interrupt the second episode of how to create a PHP gallery. Now, in this episode, you did a bunch of PHP code, and in the next episode, you're going to learn how to actually upload the picture to our database and to the root folder of the website, so we can actually show them inside our website where we have the PHP gallery. So I just want to thank you for sticking with the second episode. I know this is a long project, and it can be something that some people might jump away from because it's too long, but in the next episode we're going to finish up this project and actually do the rest of the whole upload and display process of creating that with PHP code. So I just want to say thank you, and Frida can say thank you as well. She's in here with me today instead of the other dog I usually have in here. This is Frida. Bess is the one who's usually in here, and we have a third dog called Bella, which is not in here. She's usually for herself with her mom inside the living room. So we just want to say thank you and see you next time.